order of business on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from July 23rd.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion, corrections? Okay, call the question then. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Public comment. Do we have any public comment this morning? Okay. Seeing none, we'll move on to new business. Professional service agreements and work order for the water treatment plant. Rob, you're up.
Good morning, Commissioners. Rob Bolton with Water and Sewer Department. In front of you today is a request for a work authorization through Reese Engineering, Inc., or for Reese Engineering, Inc., and this is to perform a study for the selection of a new membrane for our water treatment facility, the reverse osmosis water treatment facility. We've done a preliminary study on the expansion of the water treatment plant, which I've given you in your package. It was attached at the end. And what their findings was, with multiple discussions that we had quite a few meetings on it and tweaked it back and forth, was that in the future for the reverse osmosis, there's two existing slots that we could put what they call a skid or membranes in, which would increase the capacity of the reverse osmosis plant, and it would provide better water quality for us. Also, it would remove our reliance on the western well field that we have, which may be able to free up some of those areas that are kind of restricted for the airport, and those areas are where we have contaminated wells out in those areas. And it would actually reduce our operating costs. So one of the first go-arounds we had with them, we were looking at 1 to 2 million gallon skid was our original intention. As we started looking at how we would operate the plant, it became quite clear that we would do better with putting 2 smaller skids in than 1 larger skid, so that we wouldn't be turning on and off treatment units. We could set treatment units and let them run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, stabilize our water production, and get better water quality. So as another handout that you had today, I did a financial analysis on it, and believe it has the complete expansion of the reverse osmosis, which will take 2 to 3 years, has a payoff somewhere out in year 2024. So if it doesn't come online until 2015, it's about a 9-year payoff. So what's nice about what we found is that the annual savings that we will receive will pay for the new infrastructure that's needed for the reverse osmosis plant. The ultimate goal is to get to where our water that's being produced is roughly at a minimum 50% reverse osmosis to lime softening, but we would like to get in the goal of 2/3 reverse osmosis to 1/3 lime softening. It'll give us better water quality, water color. Also, it will reduce what they call disinfectant byproducts. When you add chlorine to water that has organics in it, you get a formation of what they call trihalomethanes, which some studies in the past have shown could cause cancer. It was a major concern back in the 80s. That's why we switched to a chloramine-type disinfectant. We weren't the only ones. Most of the water systems along the eastern seaboard are on a chloramine-type disinfectant. The federal government is forever changing the regulations, so what was good 3 or 4 years ago, you'll see future changes to where not necessarily the level of the disinfectant byproducts for THMs is going down, but the number of sites that we have to test. So statistically, anytime you add more sites, chances are you may have changing levels that may get us to a point where we may exceed that threshold and therefore would have to put out a public notification. It's not a standard that we would have to change treatment on. However, you would have that public notification, you would have a public awareness, you'd have a public concern. Therefore, with moving forward with this, we would fund it through our savings and we wouldn't end up in that situation. So it's my recommendation that we move forward. Reese Environmental was picked from a CC, or Competitive Consultant Negotiations Act, requires us to go through and pick a consultant through a process. We did that 4 years ago. They were teamed with Baskerville Donovan Inc. The first reports that we received was from the two companies. However, moving forward, Reese's was the strong member of that team in the water side, where Baskerville Donovan was the strong on the wastewater side. And to save money, we really don't need to involve or engage Baskerville Donovan at this point. So I'm recommending that we just engage Reese directly to save money. Any questions?
I have a question.
Okay.
If I could.
Sure. Go ahead.
What's the normal useful life of the piece of equipment that requires, in your opinion, an upgrade?
The useful, well, what we're looking at changing now is the membrane. Okay, and the membranes, their life is anywhere from 5 to 10. Our track record is we're getting over 10 years out of them. The first membranes we put in 1992 were hydronautic membranes, and we got roughly 10 years, almost 11 out of them. Right now we're on 10 years on these membranes. These are tricep membranes. The reason we have to go through the process of picking a new one is as part of the cost savings, because we're moving to more reverse osmosis and we don't need as tightly wound a membrane because we're decreasing the amount of lime softening. So therefore, if we go to a looser wound membrane, or what they're calling a low pressure RO membrane, we reduce our electrical costs. I don't have to run as high a pressure to push it through this membrane because the membrane is more loose. So that's why we have to go through the whole selection process. We went through a selection process when we went to the triceps back 10 years ago. It was about the same cost as this. This one's a little bit more detailed because before we were trying to find the best membrane still to remove, everything. In this situation, we're going to be writing a specification that has what's the cost of the membrane, what's the life of the membrane, what's the power saving of the membrane, what's the water quality. So the evaluation is going to be a little bit different. Once they select a group of vendors of like 3 or 5 that they feel can compete on for it, then they'll actually go out for a bid on those 3 to 5 and allow them to bid on it. So it's a benchtop pilot study. Is really, we'll get the membranes in, run them for a couple days or a couple weeks, evaluate how they're working, and then let them price out what the cost would be.
Okay. What is the, you say this is going to pay for itself. What's the payback time frame?
Well, the membrane selection of the first ones is immediate. I mean, you're going to have a $75,000 to $80,000 power savings on those for a $75,000 engineering cost, plus I think the membranes are around $200,000, $250,000. So there's like a 2 or 3 year. The ultimate long-term everything is I think it's like $2.5 or $2.8 million, and that payback was, I believe, 2024 if it came online in 2015. So 9 years. So it pays for itself within the life of the membranes.
Rob?
Yes, sir.
I assume that we meet or exceed any regulations there are in terms of water purity and so forth. in existence today with the existing membrane.
Yes.
So if that's the case, and I understand you're going to get some improvement that you've discussed, what brought about the need basically to replace the membrane at this time?
The membranes, when you first put them online, they degrade over time. They start to clog, and then you clean them. Every time you clean them, you destroy part of the membrane because it's an aggressive cleaner to go in there and try to declog the membrane. So they do have a lifespan, no matter what. And if we don't replace them in the next year or two, then as they'll clog more frequently, you'll have to clean them more frequently, which is costly. But as you're clogging, your pressures go up and your electrical costs go up. So we're getting at the time right now where we need to replace the membranes.
Can I speak? I agree with Rob. The lifetime of ROs goes down over time with the membranes. The more you use them, they do foul, and it does cause quite a problem with your water quality. I also agree with him that right now the standard water quality standards are at point A. Within the next couple of years, they're going to point B. And when they go to point B, that's down, not up. And at that point, it's going to become harder and harder to meet your TTHMs, HAA5s byproduct, even using chloramines. And if we wait until that happens, then you're under the gun. You will end up having to do something really quick, and you might make a humongous error if you don't do the process of finding a membrane that will take our water quality that we have, because water qualities are not the same across the board. So you have to determine what your specific water quality parameters are and what you're targeting, which may not be what somebody else is targeting. So therefore, the study is good in that you will pick the membranes that will best serve your purpose, and in the long run will probably last somewhat longer, we hope, now that technology is getting better. And maybe we will extend it, maybe instead of 10 years, you can go 15. But to sit around and wait for these things to all happen and then be caught having to jump is probably going to cost you a lot more. And at this point, I can see the savings. It is true. The lower pressure is better on the membranes, too. And also going to two smaller ones or two units that operate more consistently than to have one big one coming on and running for an hour and a half and then going off and then sitting there and then coming back on and running for an hour and then off again for 10 to 12 is bad, because the membranes they need to stay moist, and if water's not running through them, the membranes dry out, and this is very detrimental to your membranes. So there's a lot of good that will come, and also the water quality being better. It's not going to hurt to have better water quality, because the EPA is coming down with some new regs pretty soon, and they're going to be pretty tough.
I've got a few questions. Rob, I thought I heard you mention the water color also. If you fill up your bathtub these days, you'll see it's kind of yellow. So tell me what's going to happen there, please.
Yeah, two things that you see. A greenish tint is because the water is coming on the lime softening plant. We have two plants, reverse osmosis, lime softening. We mix the two waters together. The city started off originally in the lime softening business, then moved into the reverse osmosis building in '92 business. But the water that's coming from the superficial aquifer is down in a lime rock layer. So if you were to go down to South Florida and look at some of those borrow pits that they have, it has that green color to it. You're seeing that water that's coming out of that lime rock area. And chlorine will remove some, but the more you introduce chlorine, the higher you have a THM production. So you're trying to constantly balance this. Through the reverse osmosis treatment process, you remove that physically by pushing water through a membrane, and that color is removed. Same thing with iron. You'll have iron in different areas of even our airport well field that we have. Some areas are higher in iron, some are lower in iron. So depending on the wells that are running at any given time, you have iron presence in the water that, again, chlorine will knock it down, but you're running into that balance issue. So again, the iron will be removed through the reverse osmosis. So your color will be better. It'll be clearer water.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. The other question I had, because they addressed some of the others I had, but you also mentioned that, and I want to understand that there would be a reduction on the requirement for water from the well field at the airport. Does that mean it's going to be eliminated or a reduction, or it'll be those well fields will now become just reserve in case we? I was kind of curious, what that implication is for those well fields at the airport.
We're looking at and what we've put in for our CUP amendment would be to retire the western well field. Not necessarily fill the wells, close the wells, everything else, because it is still an area where there is contamination. You would want to have them available to monitor and be able to pull water samples out of. But we would run what we call the northern well field, which is north of the water treatment facility along US 1, and it curves around to the north side of the airport up along 43rd, and then what we call the southern well field, which is down at the Vero Beach High School, elementary school. There's some wells that run down along the sand ridge that runs along US 1 and rely on that water. Everything in the area of Piper and going west on Aviation and then north on 43rd Avenue, all those wells in that area, we would retire those wells.
Thank you.
Rob, I have one question. Does the lower pressure membrane give you a better efficiency? In other words, a lower reject ratio?
The reject ratio will be the same. The electrical will be less, but with the lower wound membrane, the water quality will be a little less, so that you can't go to a low pressure membrane and still operate our system the way we are today. The only way it works is to do the whole project.
What do you do with the reject water?
It goes down the injection well. Used to go into the river. However, just like everything else, the concerns of the river, total maximum daily load, TMDLs, set a level to what we could discharge into the river. The problem was the study was performed when we were operating our older membranes, the original hydronautics. When we went to the tricep membranes, the concentration stream was greater. Therefore, when we hit month 13 of the first year of operation, we were in violation, and therefore we had to. And we were already in the process of putting in the injection well, so we were able to satisfy DEP by saying we're just going to switch and inject it down the injection well. So we're out of the river now. We don't discharge anything into the river; it goes down the injection well.
Okay. Could I?
Yes, sir.
Rob, I have a couple of questions related to the financial implications. First of all, was this amount for the study and the evaluation included in this year's budget?
Yes.
And secondly, when will the full impact, if you proceed with the new technology, when will the full impact of that financial impact be felt? Is that in the next year?
Now, if you look down the bottom of that spreadsheet I provided, there's a red letter says payoff cumulative annual savings.
Yep.
You'll see where it starts in year 2015 as $234,056. So that's where I'm anticipating the savings to start.
But at the time of installation, what is the capital cost?
The capital cost for everything is $2.885 million.
And that's planned if everything is
Right.
approved and so forth. When is that planned? In the next fiscal year?
Yes.
And finally,
2014. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Do you have a 5-year capital plan? And if so, was this included in the capital plan that's been developed for the city?
Yes. Went through it in this budget process.
Thank
and
you.
It's all in there. So all the financing for all this is in that 5-year plan.
Thank you.
Okay.
The contract that you're proposing with Reese, Is that a time and material? Is that lump sum for that quoted amount, 75,000 roughly?
Let me. Maximum fee, so it is a time and material.
Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any questions from the public? Mark, I see you up there.
Mark Mucher, 617 Indian Lilac Road. I did have what I hope is a quick one, and it doesn't have anything to do with the quality or the engineering. I don't know anything about that. Just from a financial standpoint, I was kind of shocked when I heard a 9-year payback, so I wanted to ask either Cindy or Jim, what's customary for major municipal paybacks. But then I heard that and usually after the payback period, after the 9 years, you kind of go free and clear, and you're, in high cotton. But then I heard that the membranes are 8 to 10 years. So to not the total amount, but then you're kind of starting over again on a payback when you're buying new membranes. But I guess you're going to buy new membranes anyway. But I guess what I'm asking is a 9-year payback on a project of this type good or bad or average, or where do we stand on that?
Okay. Rob, you want to answer that?
Yeah, I can answer that because normally you don't have a payback on a project like this. So this is an unusual situation where we do have a payback because we have a savings. Most of the time you're faced against regulatory requirements that you're just going to have to install it no matter what it costs you, and then you're going to have an expense. Lucky we're in a situation where through the evaluation we were able to actually have a cost savings in a treatment system and have a payback period.
So normally we would pay for our capital through rates. In this case, we're effectively paying for this capital
through the
improvements.
savings, and the rates are stabilized. Right.
Okay.
Normally you would put something in like this and raise the rates to cover the capital costs.
Okay. Does that, Mark, answer your question?
I would go along with that from a financial standpoint if the project was required, but I thought he told us, and Jane indicated it was a good idea to do it now, but that it wasn't a required project at this point. Now, there is a timing aspect of it, I understand. And I understood Jane's comments to say that, it'd be smart to, if you're going to do it, it'd be smart to do it at this time.
Well, one of the pieces of information in the backup is that our current membrane is at 7 years old, so it's at reaching the end of its useful life. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but go ahead.
What I was, and maybe I didn't say it exactly right, what I'm saying is you're getting close to the point where you're going to start having problems with your water quality deteriorating. The rate we don't know at this time, but if you wait until it starts deteriorating and going down, then you take the chance of getting to the position where you can't meet the requirements, and the regulatory agency will then come in and tell you have a certain length of time at which we don't care what it costs, you will change, or you will make an adjustment. At 7 years to 8, your membranes are starting to foul a lot more often, and you don't want to take the chance for your water quality to go out, because right now the regulatory compliance agencies are trying very hard to drop these levels. We went from parts per million 20 years ago to trillion, and now we're going down even farther. And so you don't want to get caught in that. And again, the ratepayers would get stuck with a hugely bigger bill because you would have to jump in, bring somebody in, you wouldn't be able to study it, and you would have to knee-jerk put something in. And if it didn't work and last over time, this time we may pick something that'll last longer than 10 years because we would hope technology now is catching up with an increased way to make these things operate longer.
Okay, I understand that, and that's a good answer. But I don't pretend to understand the whole system, and you're describing problems in the RO system, and we've also got another system, which is the Lime system. Is that correct? Is that having the same water quality problems? Because it seems like we're shifting from Lime to RO.
Well, it's better.
There
You are, and that's what you want to do. You want to get out of lime softening as possible. You cannot do 100% RO water back into your system because of the aggressive nature of RO water. So you have to blend. So you do have to have a blending process. So the lime softening provides you the ability to blend with water quality which is better than you would if you had to use raw water to blend. So you are in a better position than a lot of places where they have to blend with their untreated water, or do some kind of softener or filter or something. But the water quality that you're getting through your lime softening is somewhat better. But you want to minimize how much of your lime softening water you have to use, because, like he says, color is an issue. And this, when you blend back, if you don't be careful with your blending, you end up blending back in to where you were before you started, or at least the quality is not what you want. So the problem here is you cannot totally use RO water to go out into the distribution system. So you have to blend it with something to bring it back to a neutral, aggressive level, the stability. So there's some chemistry here that we're playing with too.
I'm just trying to understand it.
No, we appreciate that, and I think one other thing for clarification, it's going to take 2015 before this is in place?
Yeah. This is the first part of the study. We'll pick a membrane, and then we would start design on the other parts of the system. And kind of answer Mark's question, the payoff period of replacing membranes is typically 3 years. So we would be getting at the end of, we would pay for the whole entire system at the end of the useful life of those first membranes, but then you would replace those membranes and then see that payoff in 3 years and a savings after that. So it's a rolling payoff with membranes. You end up increasing pressures, higher operating costs, then dropping back down to a lower operating cost.
And with that 2-year time frame and a 7-year-old membrane right now, we need.
Well, we're at actually, those membranes are at 9 or 10 years of age, not 7 years of age. So we're at
I thought it said 7.
The original memo, I think, that we started was at 7, but I actually called our water plant to find out when they went online, and it was August of 2000, August of 03. So they're 10 years old now.
Yeah.
So they're at the end of their useful life.
Yeah, and we got a year and a half to go.
Right.
We have to use them. All right. Well, any other questions from the committee or the public, Rock?
I assume, by the way, that the CFO and the city manager have signed off on this, or it wouldn't be here in front of us. Is that a correct assumption, by the way?
Yes, sir, it is. When you see a payback that's obviously less time than the life of the improvement, we would sign off on that. And in this particular case, what we're doing is changing the course of our operation. As been said many, many times, we're relying more on the RO, and based on everything we've read about the regulations coming down the pike, this is the direction to go, and I believe Jane confirmed that as well.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Jane.
I'll make a motion that we approve
Okay.
this professional services agreement and work order for the water treatment plant.
All right. Any discussion? We have a motion to approve and a second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Okay. Thank you very much, Rob. Do you want to? We have. Yeah, later on we might be coming back to septic tanks.
Right, and I'm going to look for something on the internet right now, one more
Okay.
slide for that presentation. So
All right,
while
thank
she's
you very
doing
much.
this, I'll be back.
All right. Okay, yeah.
Just one second.
Is that it? Oh, no. What you have before you is really two things that are related. We have updated our 1213 utility rate sufficiency analysis to include actuals for both sales and purchase power costs through August of 2013, as well as a updated forecast for September. And after doing that, also prepared a rate sufficiency analysis for the fiscal 13-14 based on what we found. Essentially, per our updated 12-13 forecast, we're projecting a deficit of about $924,000 through the end of September. And what we're finding is that this is due primarily to our purchase power costs being very close to our original forecast, although our sales were lower. So essentially, we have a problem with our margin, and this additional piece of paper, which I'd like to come back to in a moment, that we passed out, I think will show that to you fairly clearly. Back when we did our original forecast back in December of 2012, we used, and I think Tom Richards is here when we talked to specifics, the more conservative number for costs that we were provided by OUC. And basically what we're finding is that the actual costs are coming out a little higher to the range, higher end of the range that they gave us. And so as a result, what we did is prepare the 13-14 analysis using more conservative estimates for our OUC costs, and also in an attempt to essentially offset that $900,000 deficit that we're projecting for the end of 12-13. Let's take a look, if you don't mind, for a moment at this one piece of paper here, which I think does a better job of conveying what we're talking about for 12-13 than the more detailed analysis here. If you look at the top, what we're showing here is the original forecast that we had back in December 2012, isolating OUC only, and then for all of our purchase power costs from all our providers. Our original forecast was for about $33 million in costs from OUC, with purchases of 523,000 megawatt hours, and the dollars per megawatt hour at 64 for OUC alone. Then about 58.8 for all the power costs, with 748,000 megawatt hours of purchases and a combined cost of $78.56. What we've experienced in 12-13, again, actuals through August with a September estimate, is quite different. Although our OUC costs were actually higher, a little over $34 million as opposed to $33.5, the purchases we made were lower at $4.89, and so our dollars per megawatt hour actual are at 70, or about 9% higher, a little over 9% higher for OUC alone than we estimated for 12-13. And again, if you look at all the power costs combined, we're projecting about $59.5, and again with lower purchases, 775 megawatt hours, for a blended cost for all of them of $83, which is about 6% higher than what we had estimated for 12-13. So essentially that's our issue. During 12-13, if you look out to the right, we had, based on our original forecast, established a $74 per megawatt hour bulk power rate in our rate structure, and you can see that was even a little bit on the low end compared to our forecast, but definitely not adequate for what we experienced for 12-13. So what we've done for 13-14 is gone to a more conservative estimate for OUC as well as all the power costs, increased our cost estimate, increased our dollars per megawatt hour to 71, almost 72 for OUC, and right around the same amount blended that we had for 13-14. What this means to our rates, or what we're recommending that this means to our rates, is that we change our bulk power cost component in our rate structure from $74 per 1,000 kilowatt hours to $76.50. Effective October the 1st. And again, with the analysis that we've provided, we have a forecast that this would replace the $924,000 we think we're going to be short by in the current fiscal year. And what that represents is an increase of 1.9% on a typical 1,000 kilowatt hour residential bill. What we will continue to do throughout this year is what we've done in the past, and monitor this on a quarterly basis, come back to you, the Utility Commission, and see how our more conservative estimates are playing out in 13-14 versus our actual experience. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions you might have. I think, is Tom here? Or he may be able to talk more specifically to the purchase power costs.
Okay. Do we have any questions?
Many.
Okay.
A couple of observations. Looking at the charts here on page, I think it's page 6, of actual versus forecast for both sales and billed revenue, at this point we're on an even par. The forecast and the actual being one and the same, or very nearly. And it looks to me like, again, what we saw a couple of months ago was where the big deviation occurred that has created this imbalance goes back to January, when we had an abnormal percentage of power coming from Stanton and not St. Lucie. Is that right?
Tom could speak to the specifics, but again, I think that the bigger, to me, just being mathematically one of the bigger messages of this particular page is that although our billed revenue and our kilowatt hour sales have risen and fallen against our forecast as we would expect it they would, if you look at our purchase power costs, they don't do the same. Even though we've experienced lower sales, in a model where you've set your margin correctly, you would experience lower costs as well. But instead, we've had lower sales and yet had purchase power costs that ran very, very close to our estimate. And so this is sort of borne out by these numbers in that we've had lower sales and higher costs, and those two things combined have cut our margin to the point where we're not covering our costs.
Actually, I'm looking here at this, our actual results in the Stanton 1 unit was offline for December, January, February, March, April, and May. So about a 6-month period while they're doing significant renovations. So for those months, we had fixed costs and no energy for those units. So the energy came from elsewhere. And that has a tendency to raise our average cost a little bit.
And the costs that we're experiencing are higher because of the mix and from where we get the bulk power?
That's certainly one option, or one alternative is that sometimes the mix is a little hard to predict. We try to do our forecast as best we can, but sometimes if there's things that are unforeseen that occur, which could be an increase in variable costs or a loss of a unit or some other kind of a situation, our average costs get to be changed a little bit. And part of the issue we're dealing with here is that while we look at all these numbers as fixed numbers, really there's a fixed component and a variable component. And our incremental costs are usually less than our average costs. So if we end up buying more than we thought we were going to buy, typically the cost per unit goes down, even though the bill goes up. It doesn't go up as much as you might think. So it's to our customers' advantage if they were to use a little bit more power, their average cost would go down a little bit. And the thing that I've seen with our customer service numbers from retail sales is the last couple of years have been kind of soft sales. We really haven't really kind of made our nut in terms of trying to get where we wanted to go. And our next year's forecast is for just like 1 or 2% higher than this year, which we think is a little more like average. But the last couple of much of our load's driven by weather. In the last couple of fiscal years, our weather just has not been very extreme. In other words, we've had mild winters and not real hot summers, although we may find out in August we did okay. But it looks like our sales may be up in August, but we don't have those numbers yet.
But again, and I know we've had this conversation before, the sales is one part of it, but unless your margin is accurate, and it's pretty straightforward. If you were selling something for 100 units that you thought would sell for $100 and cost you $80, and you sell only 90 units and it still costs you $80, then that margin is really the source of the problem. And again, back to this page, projecting that even just OUC only would cost us $64 per megawatt hour, and having it come in at more like 70 almost, and then being up 6% on the total mix is really what we think is the bottom line issue. And so what we're suggesting is, even though we're not moving to a place where it's complete cost recovery on that bulk power cost rate, we're moving to a more conservative place than we were when we started in December 2012, and continue to monitor it.
Okay. Cindy, if I could, so the basic concept here, like owning any business, is if you don't have enough sales, and even if your costs are budgeted as to what the projection, you're still going to have a shortfall. The shortfall goes to the ratepayers, and it'll be a constant issue as long as we have the power station, as long as we have the plant. Correct?
I would let Tom speak to that last part, but the first part of your statement, I mean, if you have a forecast based on a certain number of sales at a certain cost, and your sales are lower, but your costs are not, and you need that margin, if you will, to cover other components of your budget and of your cost, then yes, that'll, unless you get that margin right, that'll continue to be an issue. Certainly if it may well be a function of the way that we're purchasing power in terms of the cost.
Well, certainly I had to affirm that too, whether it's a power plant or contracts with fixed costs. If we are not able to sell as much or buy as much as we'd like to, that certainly increases our average costs.
One of the things, too, that I think I like to discipline myself to speak that we have a power system. We have a lot more than a power plant. And we're selling a electrical system. We're not selling just a plant. And so the plant is certainly a component of our cost. But actually, since we rarely run it, it's a pretty fixed component, pretty fixed and predictable. But yeah, it looks like, going back to the graph, and I almost wish we could get it up on this. Had the ability to get it up on the screen for the public to see it, but it is in the backup. The sales have recovered. Looks like they're recovering now towards the end of the year. And like you said, Tom, August was a really good month for you, which means it was a really bad month for me when I got my bill. It's not a matter of sales. It's a matter of cost. It's a matter that our miles per gallon effectively went down, even though it went up or went down, even though we drove further miles. If you to use a car analogy, fewer miles. So I think it is unfortunate, an unfortunate situation where it's things that are beyond our control. I want to ask a few questions if there's any other questions relative to actuals, because I wanted to kind of drill down a little bit into the forecast if we're done with actuals.
Mr. Chairman,
Sure.
if I could, just to try to throw my 2 cents worth in, and Tom and I and Cindy obviously have been over this thing over and over and over again, where we talk about supply and demand as it affects us on the local basis, it also affects our suppliers. And I think Tom alluded to the fact that even if we turn one of the Stanton plants off, we are obligated for fixed cost of that plant. So if they go out and actually buy energy at a lower cost, we get some benefit from that, but we also have to pay that fixed cost that is already in there. That's one of the problems with the component of the cost of our power supply contracts. It's a variable that moves around, and if they have less demand on their system, weather or whatever the case may be, then in many cases their cost will go up just because they have to shift to where they're getting their power supply. So it's important to know that what affects us in the electric utility industry also affects those that are supplying to us in our contracts.
Okay. Yes, Mark.
Mark Mucher again. I just want to make 2 quick points. When Tom was talking about the variable and the fixed costs and the chart and everything and the demand, he never used the C word, and the C word is conservation. As you alluded to, Scott, when you get your bill, you start sweating with the oldies. Where you might have had your thermostat on 77, now it's on 79. So I don't know that the reduction in sales is purely due to the weather. It's also due to people, looking at whether they can pay their bill or not. If they keep themselves as cool as perhaps they did in the past. That was one point. The second point is, I know it's going to be coming. The last 2 price increases we had were blamed on the lawyers and the upgrade of units 5 and 7. So I just wanted to ask in public if this is really due to fuel cost or if it's due to the lawyers and paying cash for the upgrades.
Okay, I appreciate the question. I appreciate the fact that it will be coming again. And so, Cindy, one more time. When was the last time that we financed capital/maintenance improvements?
The last time I can find an actual bond in the electric utility for capital improvements was in the 80s. Some of the bonds are labeled with more recent dates, but that's because of refinancing of the original borrowing. So certainly we've financed capital improvements, R&R, through cash on an annual basis for many years. What we have done in the last couple of years, Tom and I, is isolate that capital fund and attempt to stabilize the transfers to the capital fund so that they're even. Because in the past, if something it was 6 one year, it was 1 the next, it was 8, it was 2, and so we've actually isolated the capital fund, taken into account the standing balance in it, and evened out our transfers so that the balance waxes and wanes and everything gets covered, so that we can not have those wild swings. But certainly, the capital has been paid for with cash for many, many years.
And so even though you've stabilized, since the 80s, we've been saving money every year for capital improvements as necessary. We have a reserve, a capital improvement reserve, and when we need to do some capital improvements, we take money out of the reserve, and then we rebuild the reserve.
Exactly. I think there were a point in past budgets where the capital accounts were shown not in the manner that we're showing them now, where as the balance waxes and wanes, the drawdown or the replenishment of the balance is what fills in the gap. There were a few budgets where the gap was simply filled with a line called proposed borrowing just to make everything balance. But those borrowings were never took place. And that may be part of the source of the confusion. It was sort of a backfill, if you will, but in reality, the borrowing hasn't happened since the 80s.
Okay. And good. So I also think that there's a component of this maintenance capital project we did on 5 and 2. It came in, $2 million under budget?
I think it was closer to about $1 million under budget.
About $1 million under budget. But that actually has mitigated our need for rate increase because that particular cost has been under budget, I would think.
We actually did start the year with a larger transfer to the R&R fund in 12-13, at least a larger budgeted one. And between this coming in under budget as well as our relook or Tom's relook at the capital needs to do only the minimum that's required by the FP&L contract prior to the sale, rather than treat it as an ongoing situation, has lowered that to $3.4 million. So yes, there has been some effort during the current year to get those numbers down.
So rather than this project driving rates up, the fact that this project was budgeted into our rates at the beginning and has come in under budget has helped hold our rates down.
Yes.
Okay, so not only is the narrative out there false, it is not just false, it's actually saved us money. The other issue is the issue of the attorney's fees, the transactional attorneys, is needing to cover this. And again, would you care to address that, Cindy?
Well, I think, as I've said before, that's certainly just one cost component in a budget that has $92 million worth of costs. So, capital, debt service, operating costs, purchase power, we're talking a $92 million expense budget, and that is perhaps $1 million of it. So there are many, many cost drivers. Again, back to, is it the purchase power? I think, and if you look at this particular single chart here, it's pretty compelling that we budgeted a very low number for OUC that did not come to pass, and we budgeted a much lower number for all our blended power costs combined than came to pass by 10% and 6% respectively. So,
yeah, you can. I think if you look at that and phrase it a little differently, it makes a lot more sense. Perhaps Mark would appreciate it. But I just did a little arithmetic here, and when you take the overall power cost from the original forecast to what we currently are now experiencing, we're up $2.5 million. 80% of that, $2 million of it, is from OUC alone.
Cindy, could we talk for a minute about the accounting treatment here? And for 12 and 13, you had a current projected deficiency of $923,000. Mm-hmm. Apparently, you've indicated that resulted in a lower margin. I assume that it's been absorbed. In other words, it has not created a deficit in your total budget, city budget.
The treatment that you see here on this very first page, this rate sufficiency, is actually done on a cash basis, if you will. And so, yes, if all of the numbers here come to pass the way that we have them on this sheet, it would be a erosion of cash, if you will, of about $900,000. The reason that we're being more conservative for 13-14 is not just not to have that happen again, but if you look, there's a corresponding estimate that we would increase the cash on that cash basis in 13-14 by that same amount. You know, we think very rigidly in terms of fiscal years, but certainly this is an ongoing utility. So as we see it trending in the one direction, we take steps to trend it in another. In the past, these changes in rates were done as frequently as quarterly. And, you know, certainly we can go back there. I think our goal has been a little bit more rate stability than that. So we're sort of taking a broader view. If we are going to experience an erosion of cash in this regard, we'd like to begin to replenish that over the coming fiscal year.
I don't have a financial statement in front of me, but when you talk about that erosion, how large are the cash balances and what impact has this actually had? You know, I've watched the county now for 3 or 4 years, basically using reserves as a result, not requiring tax increases. So, how big a problem is this if, in fact, you continue to absorb in this year and next year the current projected deficiency, and what impact is that going to have on your cash balances?
You know, our cash balances right now are for the close of this fiscal year will be right around 27 to 28 million, and that includes the balances that are set aside for capital. You know, we've talked about this in the past. You know, we feel like our working capital is appropriate, but certainly as we move toward the close of the electric utility, it's not been our goal to begin to erode those balances. We have predicated some of our modeling for the future based on ending up with, after the sale, all is said and done, a balance of around $35 million in order to begin to address some of the other issues such as pension unfunded liability that we'll have after the electric utility is gone. So, you know, again, my goal has been not to erode those balances to any significant degree between now and the sale.
Rock, could I ask for clarification on that point? Those balances are strictly for the electric utility that you're giving us, right? Not
Correct.
the overall city.
Not the overall city. That is the electric utility's cash balance at this point. And it's a combination of restricted and unrestricted. We won't go into the details. 27 to 28 million is what it's been running.
Well, I think philosophically, one could make the point that cash balances could be reduced further to avoid another rate increase, which, as we have clearly begun to understand, is a tax and on the community. And with respect to that, in your cover memorandum, you talked about a rate increase of 1.9% for a user of 1,000 kilowatts of power. What I'd like to know, if you have it available, is the percentage of homeowners that use 1,000 kilowatts or less, residential customers. And therefore, if someone used, the second part of that question, if someone uses 2,000 or 3,000 kilowatts, what would be the percentage increase for larger users? I suspect, I don't know, that it's in addition, it's higher than 1.9%. And I suspect, but I don't know, that it affects the larger proportion of residential users. So if there's a way to address that issue, and I think provide some clarity in terms of the real impact on the typical user of city electric utilities.
Actually, my model does have some of that information in it. Back when I looked at some customer statistics when I created the model originally. What my statistics show is that the number of residential customers that average over 1,000 kilowatt hours a month is only about 30%. That is probably just a tiny bit light because people that had meters turned on or off during the year crept into the 0 to 500. But what I am seeing every month when I do a sensitivity analysis is if I load the actual kilowatt hours sold on a residential basis into my model, I'm coming up with billed revenue estimates very, very close. I mean, within 1% of what the model projected. So I feel like that's probably pretty
somewhere
close.
around a third.
Right, and that pans out over this year, for instance, to an average for those people who are over 1,000 to an average of about 1,700. So 30%, at least in my model, are over 1,000, and of those who are, the average is about 1,600 to 1,700 a month. That's what the model's predicated on.
And is there any way to calculate what the percentage increase would be for those users?
Not on the fly down here. So.
But that's that's worked into your model.
The percentage increase or these statistics regarding the percentages over?
Well, the statistics regarding the percentages.
The statistics regarding customer usage and average usage that I just gave are part of the model.
Right,
yeah.
and so if that's the case, then when you apply this rate increase to your model, it's going to, you don't have the ready information of how much it would increase a $1,500 bill.
I don't.
Would it? At what point do we charge more?
The second tier of our richer, maybe Tom can help me. Thought I had that with me. I think it is. Is that the break? We're trying to determine, I don't know if I have it with me, if the second tier of the rate structure kicks in, I believe at 1,000. But I don't have that with me.
Okay.
Wait, hang on, I do. 5, 6, 9, 14. It does. It kicks in above 1,000.
Just right at 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
On the usage part of the charge, it kicks in at 1,000.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Did you use the projected amount in 2013-14? And I attended some of the budget sessions. I missed this one. Did you include that amount in your budget projection for the electric utility for 2013-14?
The only difference between this analysis and the budget for 13-14 are the purchase power costs as well as the sales.
But is the deficiency, the 931,000, was that figure used? Had that been calculated for the budget presentation?
The budget we just adopted was for 13-14, and that does not have the $900,000 deficiency. The 12-13 budget is the one that we're saying may have a deficiency, and that'll be taken into account in our budget amendment. And again, I know it's hard when you get these 2 years together and you're talking about one that has and hasn't happened in adopted budgets. 13-14, our adopted budget showed a sales and purchase power forecasts that were based on where we stood in 12-13 a couple of months ago, last time we talked about it. And so the budget was balanced. What we're saying now is that these 13-14 numbers actually, based on our analysis, will come in higher to replenish what we think we're going to erode this by in the end of 12-13. I don't know if that answers the question, but...
Well, I think Rock brings up a good point, and if I missed something in your explanation, Cindy, it seems that he's getting at, what is the appropriate level of reserves for that fund, and how does that relate to unfunded liabilities for pensions? Did we have those covered?
I guess, that's the unfunded liabilities for pensions. That's something we can just put aside. I mean, we're looking way down the road at that. As far as the appropriate reserves in the electric utility, I think they're appropriate where they sit right now. And again, until I get different direction, my goal has been not to erode them. We did in this past year separate operating reserves versus capital, and as we spoke of earlier, we've setting the capital aside. There's years where we've programmed to erode it a little and then replenish it so that we can even out those transfers from the operating side. But certainly for me, my goal has been, as it is in all funds, not to budget to live off reserves, if you will.
Sure.
And certainly if I get a different direction than that, I can do it differently. But we're trying not at this point to establish a rate structure that depletes reserves.
Appropriate reserves are, in your mind, $30 million. I think I heard you say.
Right now, we'll be about 27 or 28, including capital.
And what is the analysis that supports that? Can you give me the short version of it?
Well,
why we need $27 million?
The short version is that if you look at rate making agencies, bond rating agencies, I've seen everything from 120 to 150 days of working capital being appropriate for a utility of this size. The other thing is that a couple of years back, fiscal 10-11, when we did end up with a situation at the end of the fiscal year where we eroded our balances and had almost a $2 million decrease in net assets for that fiscal year, it caused both Fitch and Moody's to have a look at our financial statements and say, hey, and we did get a very small downgrade by one of those rating agencies. So, they want to see not only appropriate reserves, but they also don't like to see a situation where you, year after year, are budgeting to eat up your reserves in order to achieve, rate stabilization. Their goal is that your rates are at an appropriate place to provide debt service coverage for that year, as well as to cover your operations. So that would be.
So $27 million is approximately 150 days worth of operating.
I think we're up again. If you take the capital out of it, I believe the last time we looked at it was about 120, 130.
Okay, thank you.
Now, but this rate increase is going to restore the deficit over the next fiscal year?
It would.
So we're going to actually create a surplus.
If these numbers are exactly right, then we'll end 12-13 with a $900,000 deficit, and we'll end 13-14 with a $900,000
numbers to be anything less than exactly right.
with a $900,000 increase. It evens it out across the course of a year.
The question that brings to my mind is what would we have to do? What would our rates have to be to stop losing money? If we just said, let's just stabilize it at a $27 million reserve and not move to a $28 million, if we just call it $1 million deficit. So we're going to create $1 million surplus next year with these rates increase. What would we have to increase the rates now just to stabilize?
And not replenish the $900,000?
Not replenish the $900,000. So we lost $900,000.
Something less than 1.9%.
Materially
they would.
less?
I don't believe that they would. You could decrease them, but it would probably be somewhere between the 0 and the 1.9%. Again, my going in position is to not erode fund balance and to replenish it.
I'm not asking you to erode fund balance. I'm just saying, what if we budgeted to just keep our fund balances neutral at the place that they're at?
Somewhere between the 0 and the 1.9%.
Okay. Closer to 0, which would be really good, or closer to 1.
I really don't like to throw numbers off the cuff.
All right.
I could certainly do that analysis, but I'd really prefer not to toss one out.
Philosophically, though, Jim, what's your feelings on the reserve balance, the levels?
To me, the 120 days is a very good number. It takes one hurricane. People quit paying their bills. We have ongoing costs, additional costs, and those are industry standards that we've looked at. And what we're trying to do is retain that $27 million as our goal to maintain that level. Now, as operational costs go up, at some time that 27 may have to become a $28 million. So I think in order to keep it stabilized, which is what we're trying to do, and try to minimize rate increases on a annual basis, I guess, was really what our goal is. This is the route to take. We could have fluctuating rates. We could say, okay, we're not going to go up and have no rate increase this year and face another $900,000 depreciation and have to go up 3% next year. So, but we're really trying to sort of gauge, based on all the information coming from FMPA, the cost of power supply and power purchases are going to have an increasing cost. We don't see a decrease, especially when our fuel component is pretty heavily into coal. But the good thing is there's a possibility FMPA will get more access to some nuclear power and some of these that will help stabilize those costs. But what we see is that it is a commodity that does not see a future of decreasing in value. And so I wholeheartedly endorse the 1.9%. I think it's a minimal in order to maintain that financial stability of the 120 days. It also keeps our fund balance from eroding and giving an indication that we're taking from our reserves. I personally don't believe that operation of any business, especially in the utility business, taking from reserves is a long-term strategy. I think it placates temporarily some issues, but eventually you're going to be faced with that.
Well,
those numbers.
My suggestion here isn't leaning towards continue to bleed down reserves. My question is do we need to add $1 million or $900,000 to reserves during the next fiscal year?
If you're going to stabilize that reserve at $27 million. Because we're taking that number from it right now, so it's actually going down. And if we're going to restore that and keep that same number,
so this brings us back to the $27 million.
That is correct. You're taking away from your cash reserves.
At one point, it was around $30 million, and again, that part of it included the capital. That $30 million would be 120 days. At 28, it's at 111, 112. So, what we're suggesting is that as we go back and forth between that 110, 120 number, that's the right place to be. You begin taking $1 million a year off of that, and you start to erode that fairly quickly.
Okay. Well, I think that I would make a suggestion that the next time we do the rate sufficiency study, that you add an analysis of our working capital, our days working capital. That would be helpful.
Also, Mr. Chairman, one of the things that we've really done, and Cindy pointed it out as well as Tom earlier, in order to stabilize our rates, we have taken a second look at our capital projects, not only at the plant but also T&D, in order to start understanding the terms of our contract with FP&L, what we need to do to maintain that stability of the ongoing utility standards, but at the same time not investing in something that has a relatively short-term life, which is the power plant.
Okay.
And on that point, given what you know today, when is, if everything continues to go, we get our approvals, when will be the turnover date projected? What are you using at this point?
Rock, I think that's next on our agenda. We're going to have an update on that. And we have Ms. Brunges from FP&L here to help with that too. So if you can hold off on that question, I think we're going to spend some time on it, and let's get to the...
Well, I think the important issue on that is basically these projections, and you're running this as if the sale doesn't go through because there's no guarantee of the sale. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We have to maintain a level of strategy that if we get a hurricane, remember in our contract, FP&L does not have to take over a damaged system.
Right.
We're running it as a going concern, and we're running it
and I think
with
that's
rate
prudent.
Sufficiency. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I have a couple of other questions, and I think I know the answer, but I'd just like for you to confirm them, Cindy. And thank you. I mean, I think Scott's point about bringing us that information, you guys live with this and deal with this every day. And so when you come here and you give us this rate, it's kind of nice to give us the big picture. Hey, guys, keep in mind that we have to keep this balance because of our bond rating. Here's the numbers, blah, 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 blah. And we go, oh, that makes sense. Thank you very much. You're projecting all power cost on this additional handout at $82.70 per megawatt hour. Mm-hmm. And you're going to charge $76.50. So obviously there's a shortfall, and I'm assuming that's made up in the fuel surcharge. Is that correct?
It's made up in other components of the rates. I haven't seen a place in the past few years where the blended purchase power cost has been equal to the bulk power cost component of the rate at any point. So, yeah, that gap is there, and there are other components of the rate that appear to yield rate sufficiency.
Okay. So I'm a little confused. So we're actually not going to be experiencing 82.70 per megawatt hour. Is that what you're telling me? If you're going to charge the customer 76.50,
No, I'm saying that the bulk power cost adjustment rate is only one component of the rate. There are base charges, there are kilowatt hour usage charges.
Right. Okay.
So, given all of those components of the rate, we are projecting to produce this much revenue.
Okay, all right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but that's basically what I was trying to say. I just referenced one of them, the fuels. Okay. So where are those other items? They're going to be stagnant or static, so you anticipate no change in those. That's why they're not in the analysis?
That's why they're not in the analysis. We anticipate no change in those. And actually, we haven't had any change in any of those in a couple of years.
Okay. Thank you.
And we recover those costs through the other part of our rate structure. The bulk power rate is just one item on our bill.
Just one component of your rate
The
structure.
other component of our bill is where we recover those costs.
On your bill, it's called fuel cost, I believe. We call it bulk power cost adjustment, but on your bill, it shows up as the fuel cost line. That would be this adjustment. You still have a base charge, you have a usage charge, and those are part of the rates as well.
Have we considered adjusting the way we bill so that we would increase our fuel charge on our bills or the base power cost to equal what we anticipate paying and then lower the other component of our rates?
Honestly, that would require, in my opinion, utility rate analysts to come and look at your entire rate structure, because those other pieces of the rates would need a similar kind of analysis in terms of projections and break-even et cetera. So no, at this point, because we're running pretty well behind full recovery.
I think I asked a simpler question than that, and you gave me a very complex
I will try to
The answer
give
is
you a
no,
very
then.
simple
I mean,
question.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
No.
The answer is no. This would not be a stage in our history that we need to do a study. But what Cindy is saying is exactly right. That is a detailed rate study.
Okay. I'm not asking the question correctly because I'm getting a very different answer. But I'll let it go. With respect now, I wanted to talk a little bit about the forecast, and you've actually used the term conservative for both years, and I think that you use we get a range from OUC. They project a range, and we used for 12 and 13 the lower end of the range, and for 13, 14 we're using the upper end of the range. Okay, so that's correct. And what was do you have the information there? What the range was for the 2 years?
Actually, that information is kind of a moving target. And you see asked us to keep that confidential, so we take it to verbal and put that in a forecast. It's just, like every forecast, it's a forecast. At the end of the year, you'll find out it's all wrong.
Okay. All right.
If you do look at the original December rate sufficiency analysis, though, there was a OUC high, OUC low number in total. And the original forecast, if you give me just a moment here, I can tell you what we had thought. Just in a total basis, the high end of OUC would have been on that low range, on the high end of the range.
And that's actually the number, Tom, that I was looking for.
Those numbers haven't changed much this year. Those are a year old. They
Right.
haven't changed much.
Right. I actually don't have
Range is
that.
still about the same.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think we all prefer rate stability. And so using the higher end of the estimates, I think is better. And it would always be good to be able to come back and say, good news with rates.
And certainly, and we've talked about this a little bit. I would never be cavalier about $900,000, but if you look at the bottom of those forecasts, that's 1% of revenue and expenses. So, and at times that has dipped below 1%. So certainly there's enough variability. And as Tom said, we do our best to project the future, but a 1% difference either direction is not particularly large.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, frankly, I'd prefer to wait for a quarter. that may be very unpopular, but it seems to me that a lot of things are going to shake out in the next quarter, particularly whether sales continue to rebound. And we'll have a better idea, perhaps, of what the fuel costs are in that quarter. And depending on what is said in the next presentation, we're probably getting a reasonably clear picture as to whether or not we're going to be selling the utility. That's just a personal view. I think that it falls on deaf ears, I know, but every time we do this, and in the aggregate, what has it been for the last year? 7-8% or more, and we get these incremental increases. It is a penalty to many ratepayers, and I think that, although I'll be accused of looking out for my own interest, that's not the case. I think it's the people in Vero Beach who continue to suffer the major consequences in terms of having this artificially low tax rate, property tax rate, and continuing to increase utilities. So I've said my piece. I'm going to vote no if it's for approval today, and I would prefer that if there's any compromise that people are interested in, we wait for a quarter.
Okay, I appreciate that. Yes, Mark.
I wanted to ask a follow-up question about the reserves, but I think it's pretty clear that they are proposing coming back again in January and seeing how things look then. And if you did turn this down today, it would just be higher in January because there'd be more catch-up. But with respect to the reserves, I'm going back a few months or maybe even a year to when the Finance Commission and the City Council, and I don't remember whether you guys looked at this or not, but when they looked at the effect of the sale on the budgets, and it was always in my mind that there was going to be, at the time of closing, a dumping of a number as high as $36 million of reserves back to the general fund to do things like the restructuring of the retirement system. The lowest number I ever heard was 30, and so I'm kind of dismayed that we're down to 27 now. And now maybe those higher numbers were the reserves plus the net proceeds of the sale, which are estimated. What's your current estimate of the net proceeds? I've heard a high of 9 and a low of 0, or some people are saying we're going to have to pay them money to take it, which is fine because people talk about those net proceeds. Some people in the phony papers will say that the net proceeds are the profit from the sale. Well, that's obviously the furthest thing from the truth, and maybe you can confirm that. But I'd like to hear the current estimates of the net proceeds.
You are correct. That $27-28 million is where we sit in cash and utility right now. The 35 or 36 is after all the net proceeds of the sale, closing of liabilities. After all is said and done, we would end up with about 35. That number for me hasn't changed. It's not just the net proceeds of the sale, which are, 8, 9, 10 million, but also remember we have customer deposits on the books, but we also have receivables and we also have payables. So that 35 is still accurate. You're right. That's 27, 28 we have now, and then after all the dust has settled, we will have a residual of 35.
But if we were to look at a graph of the reserves over the last 5 years, is it pretty level at 27, 28, or is it headed south?
Relatively level. It headed south in 10-11 when we had a budget year where we sort of just let rates lie, and you remember the CAFR came in at about almost $1.9 million in decrease in net assets. Went back up, recovered some in 11-12, and in 12-13 we made a conscious decision to use a little bit of reserves to stabilize that capital. So it's gone up and down a little, but it's become relatively stable, and that's our goal is to keep it that way. That 10-11 fiscal year did not sit well with Fitch and with Moody's.
Okay, and to go on a little more on Rock, if we were to completely take out that this year it's going to be $5.5 million. It's creeping down a tiny bit. The transfer to the general fund and totally apply that to rates, it would be, again, a very small percentage. I don't know where it would come from, but because we're not, for some reason, willing to touch our tax rate, but it would only reduce our rates by, maybe 5% if we didn't do any transfer. And then, but as of today and these rates, we're 40.4% rate-wise above Florida Power and Light for on residential anyway. To compound the question, to follow up on the question of what about higher residential rates? Are the commercial rates, the industrial rates, all the different rate classifications, are they all going up about the same amount? Or how do you figure that?
The way that I figured that for the 1,000 kilowatt hours, I actually put this new proposed rate through a bill. With the commercial, the industrial, I mean, there are other components of their bill that aren't even in the residential bills, the demand charges and some of those offsets. So, I could answer that question, but not sitting here with the calculator. Sorry.
Right. Okay. But thank you.
Thank you.
And again, it's a little harder to come up with the typical commercial customer than it is the typical residential because they're so, across the board.
Well, Cindy, I think you'll experience the fact that when you come in here with a memo that says we don't need to raise the rates, it's a lot easier presentation.
Not shocking for me at all. Not a shocking revelation.
Yeah. So.
And certainly it's not something, again, that, again, our goal has been to treat, knowing the sale is coming, still to treat this utility as a going concern and to make sure that when we say rate sufficiency, we mean sufficiency, that we are establishing rates that are adequate to cover our costs on a cash basis, on an annual basis, and not begin to live off our reserves, looking toward a future, not knowing a date. So
yeah, and I think that I'm glad your little calculation and came up with it. That at our current reserves, we have 110 days, and I think it's what you said, 105, 110, 15.
And that's real back, $28 million divided by 92
yeah,
times
real back of the napkin kind of thing.
Is 110, 111.
And so we're not at 120 today and going to 130. And so that's I think a good, useful piece of information.
Mr. Chairman, in the interest of getting back to my paying job, I would like to recognize that I appreciate Rock's concern for the ratepayer, and I do believe it is genuine, but I see it slightly differently, and I do think we need to approve this rate, so I would like this rate increase. I would like to make a motion that we approve the rate increase as submitted by staff.
Okay. Do that.
I'll second it.
Okay.
Get it on the floor.
All right. Thank you. So now, discussion.
Cindy, question: if this was not to happen, what would that look like at the end of the quarter, or what are your thoughts on that?
Again, if this were not to happen at all, I think the place where we would be left is across the 2 fiscal years down in the neighborhood of $900,000 to $1 million. If we are planning to make sure that doesn't happen to us, waiting a quarter as we did last year and not changing it till December meant that it only took effect for 9 months. And so if we wanted to recover the same amount in a shorter period of time, it would be a slightly steeper increase. And that's just on a pure math basis. In terms of our projection for the first quarter, I mean we've based on a 3-year average now for sales and on a slightly higher OUC cost, and we would just kind of have to see. I mean as a commission we've looked at this 12-13 on a quarterly basis since the beginning. It's been as it started the year we're going to be $200,000 over. It's been as optimistic as $200,000 under, as optimistic as $300,000 over, and sort of narrowed in now to about $900,000 under. So, again, it could force us to play catch up a little bit across the span of those 2 years.
And this rate increase is projected to go into effect October the 1st.
October the 1st.
When were you projecting to take this recommendation to council?
October the 1st.
On October the 1st. Okay. One of the things that I've had some discussions with Jim about the next phase of our meeting, where we're going to get an update, and we are going to hear something hopefully from the FNPA by the end of this month, and if we don't know what that answer is going to be. We don't know what that answer is going to be, and we may get a little bit more color on that. And that could affect how, what we need to do with respect to our rates. So if I'm going to suggest that we table this vote for a few minutes, and then get our update from Jim and Florida Power and Light on where the negotiations sit, and see if that might affect how we would look to what recommendation we would make to the council on October the 1st. Is that acceptable?
Well, it is, but do you want to enter into a discussion about the philosophy of what the political election is going to render in November? Is that going to change the council? I think it's prudent. Scott, I think it's prudent, the direction that has been taken. Look, I think it's clear that I am an advocate of the sale. I am not an advocate of the transfer. If it were up to me, I'd raise property tax rates and I'd lower this. But that's not the issue before us today. The course that has been taken, which I think is prudent, is to operate this as an ongoing concern. That's what staff has done. And it pains me to have to vote for this to increase anybody's rate, and I believe Rock is genuine, and I am in that. But that is the nature of the utility as we currently own it and operate it. And I think it is prudent to move forward with this for those reasons. I didn't get into all that because I felt it had been discussed. The facts that Cindy had laid on us make that very clear. We cannot mess with our bond rating. And so all of those are prudent decisions, from a business fiscal standpoint. So that's why I'm in favor of it. But would I like the whole thing shaken up? You betcha. But I don't want to start debating what's going to happen in November with the election. So until there is a clear understanding that the sale will go through, I think the current course is prudent, and that's why I made the motion.
I appreciate that, and I know that I have had, and I agree with you. I'm, as you know, I'm also an advocate of the sale, and pains me to increase rates. I feel like I'm going to vote in favor of it. Well, I know I'm going to vote in favor of this. I think after we get the little update about the status of the sale, that it's not going to change anything. But I was wondering, I have the advantage of having had some discussions with staff that I don't think maybe everybody else has, and so I wanted to give them that opportunity to do that.
Would the rest of the commission like that time? Would you like to table it? I'm happy to withdraw the motion.
I mean, you don't have to withdraw it. We're still going to be done at the same time, and we're still going to take the same amount of time to vote.
Table it. I'm fine.
And if I could add one more thing that might help a little bit. In the past and for many years, these rates as frequently as quarterly. So certainly if we do this now and we sit down in January and look at the first quarter and didn't come to pass that we needed it, we can make rate adjustments on a quarterly basis. That's not a problem. We just have taken to not doing it, and I think everyone thinks that we can only do this once a year, but we can do this as frequently as necessary to keep these rates in the right place.
Okay. Yes, Mark.
Mark Mucher again. I hate to look like a eighth commissioner, but I wanted to talk about this vote. I want to talk about this vote a little bit. In the almost 30 years that I've lived here and been watching these things, I don't ever remember city council voting on a rate increase, let alone a utilities commission. And in fact, politically, they'd be foolish to, whether there's an election coming up or not. But the staff in the past has delivered the proposed rate increases as well, there's two check boxes on the agenda items. No, what are they? No vote necessary, or information only, and council action required. Well, this rate increases have always been no vote necessary, information only, and so I don't know why you guys have to vote on this to recommend it to the council, who's not going to vote on it.
Well, what we're actually voting on is an endorsement of the rate sufficiency study that we've analyzed it. The council's asked us to take a look at this and drill down into the details of this.
Okay.
In this meeting with public access, so that the questions can be asked, and then we would actually not voting for a rate increase, but we're voting to endorse this study.
Okay.
That necessitates a rate increase.
Just as long as everybody understands that the council's not going to vote on it.
Okay, well, I'm not. I
suppose there may be a mechanism for them to get up in arms and beat the staff down on it, but it doesn't work that way.
Well, and I read the newspaper today, and I realized that the city manager is going to go ahead with making the recommendation no matter what we said. So,
all right, thank you very much.
Nonetheless, we need to do our job.
Clarification. And what Mark has said is exactly right. I will tell you, in the time that I have been in Vero Beach, one of the mandates from the City Council is to engage our various commissions in these type of decisions. Trust me, you all are just one of several. The Recreation Commission and I have sort of been at cross arms over some items, and we've sort of go around and around. But to engage you all in this type of conversation was, again, a mandate from the council, which I intend to continue to do, and then seek your guidance. And, the newspapers are correct that we are going to proceed, and that'll be my recommendation. If you all give another one, then that would be fine, too. What Mark is saying is that in the past, the administration has really just moved on with the rate adjustments. I think, again, that requires that we have conversation even on the council level to make sure that we, and I hate the term transparent, but we are trying to stay as transparent as possible. It's the reason we use our website greater than we've ever used. Someone said they couldn't find the sales agreement. It obviously is on our website, has signatures on it. And so we are continuing in that track. And if you all take a neutral view, that's fine, too. I mean, whatever gets everybody excited. But I just hope that we don't let November the 5th drive all of our decision-making as we go forward. Unfortunately, we in the city of Vero Beach have an election every year. And if I can't do anything in the last quarter of the fiscal year, we've got some real challenges ahead of us. Cindy and I can handle it, but January and February could be some pretty rough months for folks.
Well, and I don't believe that I'm letting the election affect how I'm looking at this today, because we do need it. We have a going concern. I did want to, though, as I shared, give all the commissioners the advantage of the discussion that you and I have had, and I've also had some conversations with Amy.
And I think it's good, and she and I both are ready to take the seats when you all.
Okay, well, let's go. So I don't think, Cindy, we're going to have any more questions for you. We'll just take the vote, and so thank you very much, Tom. Thank you very much. It is a hot seat this morning. Yeah, and I noticed Jim did not take the hot seat today. Oh, good morning. Where are we at, Jim?
Give you the current update, and then Amy can even give you, I think, more current. The issues that we have been driving at for the last couple of years is really in the negotiations to try to find what are the items and the elements that will make this thing happen. And it did take a couple of years. Unfortunately, that's how negotiations go. Everybody has their extreme positions. We think that we have found the common goals and the common ground to really have items to negotiate at this point. And FP&L, after we have our sales agreement with them, we sort of outlined what our terms and conditions would be. And in our discussions with FMPA, over that time, issues came out from FMPA that included issues such as their fuel component. What is their fuel mix? How would they like to see their future diversification of that fuel mix? The other is that they are looking at acquiring some power and energy outside of the state of Florida in Georgia, and they put that information out to their member cities to talk about. FP&L fortunately has some contracts in the Southern Company that would help alleviate some of those issues. And we've also defined the issue that we understand that there is going to be a challenge in our power supply contracts as they're presently structured, and there will be a cost differential for someone to absorb those. We had the contract with OUC in order to go through the process in which ourselves, FP&L, and OUC were engaged in those negotiations. We have, along with FP&L, primarily FP&L, have determined that maybe FMPA would be much easier a hurdle to get across if they would agree to take on the power supply agreements. As you know, we were sort of bogged down in the IRS issues and what their terms and regulations are. We thought we met those, but at the same time, that seemed to be an issue that kept rising up. So FP&L, to address that, has tried to structure this power agreement with FMPA. They obviously are the qualifying agency, would not require that. And at the same time, understanding that there is a price differential. And they have said that we will address that price differential. We feel like that we're on a very good path. Coming back on a timing issue. I think that if we met with and agreed with FMPA today, we still have other hurdles, the Public Service Commission and other third-party agreements. Closing probably would not take place until the next fiscal year, either in the third or fourth quarter, and I'll let Amy address that even more than I, but third or fourth quarter of the next calendar year. So we still have a going concern, using Toby's terms, and what we're trying to do in working through that. Those third-party issues are still going to have to be addressed, and there could be something that comes out of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that we're going to have to take under consideration. There may be something under the Public Service Commission that we will have to take and do some modifications. But my best guess will be the third or fourth quarter of 2014 before we could probably have a very firm closing date. But Amy, maybe you can expand on some of that.
Good morning. I agree with everything Jim said. That's pretty much where we are. You know, we had a lot of the largest hurdle was getting FMPA comfortable with a lot of these terms, with these power purchase agreements with OUC. There were issues and concerns, about the tax exempt status of the bonds, with FPL taking the power for that 3-year period, and working through all this. We had and hearing what were some of the things that were important and beneficial to FMPA, and that would also overcome these objections or hurdles that were out there. We really came up with a way to just try to create solutions to some of these problems, not create more problems, and get this thing moving. We had a meeting on August 20th, our president of our company and the CEO of FMPA, where these items that Jim discussed were presented, including that cost differential, that of the power of potentially we would be willing to resell to FMPA a portion of our transmission rights on Southern Company of transmission system. We know that's important. Is also FPL would enter into an option agreement with FMPA with respect to participation of FMPA of up to 100 megawatts related to construction of our Turkey Point Units 6 and 7. And in exchange, we asked for FMPA to the best of their ability to facilitate the approvals in an expeditious manner. And so we put that out there on August 20th, and we've heard from FMPA that they would have a response to us by the end of this month, which is coming up fairly quickly. So we're hopeful. In fact, we expect to hear from them hopefully by Monday, which would be the end of the month. And then we'll go from there. If the response is favorable, we'll start to draw up the related documentation. They may have questions that still need to be answered. So, but that's where we are at right now. And assuming that we come to terms and agree to terms with Florida Municipal Power Agency, and we get the approvals necessary, then yes, from a timetable wise, we're looking at the late 2014. Just to clarify, though, and this was alluded to a little bit earlier, and it, I have said, and I've been quoted in a local community blog as saying that we expect to have the deal done by the end of 2014. We've had candidates for the city council saying that this is, if we come to these terms with FMPA, it's a done deal. It's out of the city's hands, and we're just going to move forward. But that's only a part of what I've said, and I've been very specific to say, and it is important to know that if we do come to these terms with FMPA, that is going to require amendments to the purchase and sale agreement. And while it will not change the city position financially at all, the terms of the deal, those amendments would require city council approval. And so it's important that we would get that city council approval for everything to go forward. Even when we come to terms with FMPA, we still have to have that next step. So that's really where we are now. So it's getting coming to a meeting of the minds with FMPA, drawing up those terms, those amendments, bringing them forward to the city. We've gotten as far as we have at this point, thanks to the support we have had on the city council, and we need that to continue. And Jim is also right. We have already, in April, we had done our filing with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We expect to hear back from them shortly, in the next couple months. We have not filed with the PSC yet because we have to wait until we know exactly what the terms of the deal are. And now that 3-year PPA with OUC is potentially would change if OUC agrees to take the power and we agree on a cost differential. So once we have all that definitive, then we would make that filing with the Public Service Commission, and that would take us into next year to get the response from them. So we're doing everything that we know to do to be creative, to solve these problems, and to bring the rates. The rates are still, as of the recent figures that we have from the Public Service Commission, we're still looking at $23 million annual savings that we would bring to this community once on FPL rates. That hasn't changed, and we're looking forward to the day we can do that. But that's basically where we are right now. If that makes sense to y'all.
Okay, thank you.
Also, just another note, FMPA and their board of directors are meeting today as we speak, and Pilar Turner is involved in those conversations. I'm sure this will be a topic, although I did not see their agenda, I just presume it will be a topic of conversation.
Certainly at the water cooler, if not on the agenda.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
As a point of clarification, when you two are using the year 2014, you're referring to the calendar year 2014, not our fiscal year for the city, which is the end, right? That's correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So, and then, Amy, previously when the contract with the city was close to finalization, Florida Power and Light put out what I'll call executive summary of the deal. Okay. Are you anticipating doing that on the restructured deal as soon as you work out that dollar difference with FMPA, as soon as there's some understanding there? That was very helpful last time.
I'm sure we would do that through the city's transactional attorneys. We'd have sort of a term sheet, if you will, of the amendments or what the amendments will look like.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay.
Good work.
Yeah. Yes. Again, thank you very much. All right. So let's call the question then.
Well, I thought Sherry gave me that look when you said what we were really voting on. It was slightly different than my motion, but I would like to amend my motion to your statement, Scott.
Okay.
Which was that we're really voting to support the rate sufficiency study, which necessitates a rate increase.
Okay.
It's better language, I believe.
All right. And Jane, do you?
Also.
Okay. So.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and second that.
Okay. Great. And let's then call the question. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Okay. One opposed, so the motion passes. All right. I think then the next thing on our agenda, we come back to some update. Again, thank you very much, Amy, Jim, and Jim, stick around. You're not done. We have a discussion on septic tanks, and I think we... and Rob is back. Okay.
Yeah, here, do. Thank you. We need a homework session.
I think I'm going to need this one, yeah, because if I point with that, you won't see it on the screen for people at home. Is there a certain time you want me to wrap this up for lunch or something like that?
Yeah.
I just
if
want
you
to
go
make sure before we get started.
We've got
and we can
few
always
more
stop.
minutes.
You know what I'm saying? We can always stop and reconvene.
Just don't make
This
me
is one
use.
of them
Just don't make
discussion
me use the
things.
gavel, Rob.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Don't throw me out.
All right. Let's go.
Okay. I put this together as a presentation. We've been talking over a couple of meetings about septic tanks in the lagoon, and there's been a lot of questions, a lot of people having discussions, and a lot of scientific data. And I kind of wanted to put something together that was just a plain type presentation that people can understand the talking points and not necessarily get into all the details. So with that, I titled it The Health of the Indian River Lagoon. Let's see what's going on here. Well, I might have to toggle back and forth between them. We're not going. Yeah, it's not clicking. Froze up. This worked yesterday.
Do you have the one that's in the drawer? What are you holding?
This one worked yesterday, and that one. There we go.
Once you click off of the screen, it becomes inactive.
Oh,
So
okay.
you're going to have to do one or the other.
Okay. All right. This is... No, it's still not working. As soon as you move it. Might have to do this as a
Time's up.
time's up.
It's on.
Try clicking it. See if it works. Okay, now let me have it. All right. Now we'll go. As soon as you move it, it won't work. So
Perhaps
I
she
can sit
stay
over there,
there
but
and you can
there she can
wink
do
at
it.
her every
Okay.
time you need a new screen.
she can click it when I. Next slide. Why are estuaries special? More than 70% of Florida's recreation and commercial import fishes and crustaceans and shellfish spend part of their lives in estuaries, usually when they are young. Shallow water, salt marshes, and seagrasses and mangrove roots provide excellent hiding places from larger open water predators. Next slide. Did you know that estuaries are home to more than 2/3 of the fish and shellfish consumed by humans? Recent discussions on the effects of the humans on the lagoon has been on loss of seagrass, elevated nitrogen levels, and unexplained deaths of manatees and dolphins. Pollution in the lagoon is through discharges of nitrogen, phosphorus, and bacteria from multiple sources. It appears that there is a public fixation on nitrogen. However, phosphorus and bacteria are still important contributors. What are the sources of nitrogen contributions to the lagoon? First, you have atmosphere, where you have nitrogen fixation that takes place during lightning. Second is you have precipitation and dust fall that drops nitrogen back onto the ground. Third, you have plant animal residue compost. Fourth, you have wastewater and wastewater effluents through reuse. Fifth is mineral fertilizers that people apply to their lawns. Sixth, you have septic tanks. Typically, this is covered under item number 4, but since the large amount of septic tanks that we have here in the state of Florida, I've broken it out as a separate topic. We have no immediate control over items number 1 and 2, but we do have control over items 3 through 6. How does nitrogen enter the lagoon? Through stormwater runoff, grass clippings, and other natural debris, reclaimed water, septic tank effluent. How does phosphorus enter the lagoon? Stormwater runoff, reclaimed water in low levels, and septic tank effluent. How does bacteria enter the lagoon? Stormwater runoff through carrying animal waste, and septic tank effluent through either discharges to the groundwater, discharges through stormwater where they're along swale systems or that they're failing and discharging right out to the atmosphere, and then also discharges through irrigation where you have high amounts of septic tanks with irrigation wells that are real shallow that are pulling effluent back up and depositing back onto the ground. I was at a meeting recently on the Lake Okeechobee Basin. DEP Secretary Vineyard stated at that meeting, it was down in Stewart, that if you woke up this morning and flushed the toilet and you have a septic system, you are contributing to the problem. Septic systems work fine for properties that are on 1 to 5 acres in size. It is not the septic system that is the problem. It is the density and the proximity to surface water that is the problem. What variables are areas of concern for septic systems? One is the density, the lot sizes. Second is the proximity to the lagoon, the elevation of the water table where the septic tank is, distance from the septic tank to the water's edge, year the house was built, flow direction of the groundwater, and irrigation systems that use shallow wells. Locations of septic tanks in Indian River County. Let's see if this will click on it. I think that's going to have to use it. See if you can do it. All right, this was a map that was created by the county. We provided data to them. It was created for the health department. If you look at the map, let me see if I can work it over here. This area right here is Sebastian, and green and pink are bad. Usually I like to use the color red. or they use the colors green and pink. Green is actually septic tanks that were built prior to 1983. Pink are septic tanks that were built post 1983. So as you pan down through Indian River County, you can see where the densities of septic tanks lie, anything that is in the green and pink. Now here is the barrier island, and that's pretty much the city limits in that area, and I have another slide that will expand on that, but there are quite a few septic tanks in this county. All right, now, if you look at the total number of septic systems in Indian River County, this table breaks down, there is 30,467 septic tanks. 2,962 lie within the city of Vero Beach's utility service area. 27,505 lie outside the city of Vero Beach's service area. Of that, roughly 1,500 of the septic tanks lie within the city of Vero Beach, 1,000 in Fellsmere, 8,300 in Sebastian, 19,000 in the unincorporated areas. So the city of Vero Beach represents roughly 5% of the total septic tanks within the county. If you convert the flow of a septic tank to the flow of what we would consider as flow coming into a wastewater plant, then you have roughly 7.62 million gallons a day of septic tank effluent going into the ground. I called last week and used our flow and what the county was experiencing. We're only treating 7.7 million gallons of influent coming into both systems. So roughly the same amount of effluent is going into the ground as is coming into the sewer systems within the county. So, as you can see from the previous map and table, the city is not the problem, just part of it. This here is a map that we further went and created. And you can see that the red areas, green is where sewer exists, red areas are where septic tanks exist. So there are pods of septic tanks on the barrier island. Here's the city limits. So Central Beach area, Bethel Creek area, and then a few isolated spots along the lagoon, along the main canal out west of town, west of the railroad tracks. Originally, there were discussions on nitrogen levels and what the Kilroy units and what samples were being taken on nitrogen levels. What we plotted that information and what we later found after discussions with where the sources of information were coming from was that they were actually soil samples taken in lagoon areas and nitrogen levels in the soil. So they're not indicating the effects of septic tanks. They're indicating the effects of stormwater carrying off sediment and dropping sediment into the lagoon. And as you can see, that information will not relate to septic tanks, especially when you look at the highest purple areas are in lagoons where they are all on sewers. They're not on septic tanks. So Brian LaPointe, he gave a presentation to the City Council a couple months ago. I think that his research will probably find out more information because he's able to track indicators along with nitrogen levels back to septic tanks, whether it's sweeteners or other items that are being found in the samples that he's taken that's only going to come through human consumption and passing it through someone's body. So what do we know about septic systems? Well, conventional septic system, the average level of nitrogen removal is about 28%. Level of phosphorus removal is about 57%. Contains elevated levels of bacteria in forms of E. coli, salmonella, and other items, and it contains viruses. I did some calculations based on some information that I got from both the University of Florida. Both sources were from the University of Florida. And if you looked at the atmosphere through nitrogen fixation, you will get about 5 pounds of, and if you look at a 1/3 acre lot, which is the average lot size within the city of Vero Beach, you'll get about 5 pounds of nitrogen coming from the atmosphere. If you look at the fertilizer ordinance that we just passed, the model ordinance and what everybody's putting through in the county, the recommendation for fertilizer loading is between 2 and 5 pounds of nitrogen. I use the number of 4. So you would then add to a typical lot roughly 43 pounds of nitrogen in the form of commercial fertilizer. You then look at a family of 4, the loading again is another 36 pounds of nitrogen. So if you look at percentages, if people start abiding by the fertilizer ordinance, in the future, these are going to be your percentages of source of nitrogen on a typical home. So as people abide by the fertilizer ordinance, septic tanks will now become the next step as work needs to be done on to try to reduce the loadings into the lagoon. So what can we do to reduce nitrogen levels to the lagoon? Reduce fertilizer concentrations in stormwater. Reduce plant decomposition through grass clippings. Reduce animal decomposition through picking up animal waste. Educate reuse users to cut back on fertilization and to ensure irrigation overspray does not enter the lagoon. And 5, reduce septic tank effluent from entering the water table. Currently, items number 1 and 2 are under discussion by City Council at this time. That is fertilizer and the grass clippings, which is all part of the same regulations. Item number 3 has been addressed by providing collection stations at dog parks and at the base of both bridges. Item number 4 can be addressed via mail stuffers and through our annual reuse reporting. That would be educate people on cutting back on fertilizer because there is nitrogen in the water they're receiving through reuse. And also to check their systems, make sure they're not spraying into the lagoon. And item number 5 is the topic of today's discussion. What does a septic system installation look like? Is this one? Yep, this is the YouTube one. And I'm not.
Okay, it's time to start your new drain field. The area will be marked out where your new drain field and tank goes. And if your new drain field has to go where your old drain field is, then we need to stop right here. I need to tell you cannot allow your contractor to just stir up the old rock and pipe in the new drain field area. You cannot allow the contractor to haul it 3 properties down.
We're not going to watch all 14 minutes.
Save you some money because it's not legal to do that. Has to be hauled off the property. That's going to be the difference between maybe $300 to $800 on our proposal versus competitors.
The reason I did this was
to do that properly. Now, some of you are going to have a drain field in the backyard, and when you have real tight areas to get the backhoe in and out, it's going to slow the process down.
A septic tank, when it
You're
does
going to pay a little bit more money because it's labor intensive.
Septic tank is 18 to 20 years.
There's going to be mess.
There is a mess.
There's going to be
go to repair
dirt all over the place, out in the street, all over the backyard. It's going to look like we're digging out a swimming pool.
And that's the hole.
It's going to look messy. Get that in your mind right now, but don't panic because that'll all be raked out and cleaned up when the job's done. Now, when we do this dig out, we'll get the laser out, get it raked out and smoothed out, and get it
see if he's in this
that you need in the yard. And these louvers on the side here,
I want to get to where
in the front or the back, we'll get. But this is what we're putting in. This is all we'll put in. And on our proposal, it states right at the top line cost.
Right behind him is the septic tank itself, so that people can actually see one. Usually you see the grass on top of the ground. You don't see what's below the surface. And
I'm standing down inside a 900-gallon tank so you
really
get an
wanted to
idea
shoot.
of what it looks like. You never get to see this. We've taken the lid off of this one. And what you see here is this is a baffle. This right here is a baffle. And I don't know if you can see this hole through it or not, but it only allows the water to go through. You'll get what we call a scum layer on the top, and all the poop will go to the bottom. Now, one thing people don't realize is if you don't pump this tank out every 3 to 5 years like the state recommends, the scum layer builds up on here 1 inch, 2 inch, 3 inches thick, and then you've choked off all the air that you need circulating around in here to help grow bacteria, which breaks the poop and paper down. Now, one other thing you'll see is this T right here. It's got a pipe on it, and you will get a filter. State code requires us to put this filter in, and it will need to be cleaned possibly once every maybe 1 year to possibly 3 years. Some people get a few years out of it. But it's just clean and it'll be put right back down. And you may not want to do that yourself. Probably call somebody out. You may get charged for, depending on when you see this video, it could be $75, could be $100. But pay attention to what they're putting out in the yard
That's
there
the
for
tank.
you.
That's
that
the
way,
new
if
style
you
drain
decide
field they
you
put in.
want to make
You
an
can see the
attempt to clean out
disruption that you're going to
yourself,
see in
if
the
you can.
yard, or what
This
the infrastructure
baffle
looks
is
like underneath.
2/3 in on this tank, on any tank.
Now, discussions on 4 types of sewer systems. There are 4 really sewer systems out there that are available. One is the conventional gravity sewer system, which Vero has had in place since about 1926, is when we first got into the sewer business. It's most popular out there, lowest maintenance costs, affordable at the time of construction of subdivision. Chuck probably could answer more than this than I can, but you know, when you're building a subdivision, developing one, putting the roads in, then the cost of the pipe and the manholes and stuff is cheap. It's probably $2,300, $2,500 in material costs. When you're going back in and retrofitting after the subdivision's been there and people have driveways and they're living in that area and you have other utilities and all that, now we're talking about a cost of putting in the same infrastructure is going to run between $15,000 and $20,000 because you have to maintain traffic, you have to keep all the other utilities in place. So it's very affordable when you're building a new subdivision. It's not affordable when you're trying to go back in later on and retrofit to something. Vacuum systems are gaining popularity these days. They have a higher maintenance cost than a gravity sewer system. Normally not installed in new installations of new subdivisions because people still go back to the old gravity sewer on a new subdivision. Retrofit costs are approximately 70-80% of a gravity sewer system. There is less construction disruption in the neighborhoods during the construction of a retrofit. That is why one of the reasons they use vacuum systems are gaining popularity. Grinder system, less popular than gravity or vacuum. Highest maintenance costs. You have now put a little lift station in everybody's yard. The motor or the pump size is about 2 horsepower. You have full control system. Very small amount of capacity for receiving waste, and electrical panels that are more costly than some of the other alternatives. So where you might have a fairly reasonable upfront cost for availability, you pay for it in the second phase because the lift stations, all that is a lot more costly, and then the maintenance cost is higher. Last one is a step system. In a step system, you leave the septic tank. It's called a septic tank effluent pump. You leave the septic tank in place, or in cases of new construction, you install a septic tank. But instead of the drain field being installed, you actually install a chamber with a low horsepower, fairly cheap pump, cheap electrical panel. And since you're only pumping clear liquid, you're not pumping solids, the pumps last a lot longer. Less corrosive materials that it's doing, and then you still have to pump out the septic tank on a periodic basis. Why a step system? lowest maintenance, or it has a low maintenance. I did an analysis. You'll see it has very similar maintenance costs as a conventional gravity sewer system. Competitive pricing with a septic system replacement. If you're going to look at putting a mound system in to repair your existing septic system, you can go on a step system for about the same price. And it has the lowest upfront cost for availability. One of the problems with getting people off of septic tanks and onto sewer is there's nothing there available for them when they make the phone call to me when their septic tank is failing and they want to know if sewer is available. And I have to tell them, no, it's not available. The next question is, are they running it down my road anytime soon? There's no discussions on it. Therefore, they then contract with a septic tank repair person to come in and put a new system in for them. 20 years later, 15 years later, same phone calls come over and over and over again. Communities with step systems. City of Palm Bay has some in low-lying areas. Were put in probably in the 70s, 80s. Port St. Lucie, the same. They were general development utility areas, and they used some step systems and then pumped up to gravity sewer systems. Charlotte County Utilities has a huge amount over on the West Coast. A lot of facilities in Washington, Alabama, Ohio, and actually in a large one in the Tennessee area, and then South Alabama Utilities has about 3,000 of them that are in coastal lying areas prone to hurricanes also. This would be a cartoon of what an installation will be of the septic tank or the step system. If you look at it, you have a house, the existing septic tank, existing drain field. We propose to put in a little pump basin, put a check valve in so that the drain field, if it flooded, would not come back into the pump chamber, and then have a line that discharges out to the road, and the city would look at installing 2-inch mains down all the roads that didn't have sewers to make it available. That's a blow up of what the basin and the pump would look like. 1/2 horsepower pump with a filter system, existing septic tank with a filter in line. In case of new construction, or if somebody's septic tank was actually broken, you could go to this type of installation, which would be a new septic system with the tank basin sitting right inside the septic system to cut back on space. In this situation, you would not install a drain field. We would recommend they have a whole house generator, only because the storage level that you have between the liquid level and the tank is about 150, maybe 200 gallons of storage, so you have about 1 day. One of the items that I looked at and that we came up with this design here was so that if you had a power outage during a hurricane, the drain field would act as a backup. The problem with it is, to get approval of this, we would have to go to the state for permission, because under the septic tank laws and ordinances, you either have a septic tank system or you're on a sewer. Since this is a hybrid system, we would have to get permission to allow this. So that would be one hurdle if we decide to move forward with something.
No, but Rob, that would only work as a backup if there wasn't 2-3 inches of water sitting on top of the ground.
Exactly.
Which,
right. In the flood-prone areas, yeah. I mean, west of town, really where it would help would be the storm comes in, it then recedes and goes down, and people go back to the barrier island, and they're still out of power for another 2 days or something like that. That's when this system will work. The system we're looking at also will have a receptacle that you can plug a generator right into it, and it would start working. But and I doubt you're going to have many people on the barrier island staying there if they don't have a generator of some sort, if they have no power. And we're talking about the whole city-wide. We're not talking about just the barrier island with this. This is kind of a cutout of what the insert into the tank looks like, so you could see. Maintenance costs, I did a 75-year life cycle, since that's the average life cycle of a gravity sewer system. And as you can see, if you looked at the monthly cost for a gravity sewer system versus the step system, they're within 70 cents a month. There's so many variables when you're looking at something over 75 years, I would consider that equivalent. Here's the estimated total cost for construction. If you're looking at, for a homeowner, the equipment, and I'm hoping to get work towards maybe some lower numbers than that, but the company I've been dealing with in California, this is the number we're kind of at right now when you add in all the shipping costs, everything from California to here. I talked with the same company there, Sun Plumbing, and we talked about what the installation cost would be. He said roughly 2 people for 2 days could install it at a cost of about $2,500. He also said you would have an electrician involved for $500. You have a plumbing permit and an electrical permit. Then you have the service line, which was the line from the home where it says 1-inch discharge. Or I'm sorry, this says here service line. That is a line under the roadway or right adjacent to the roadway connecting to the 2-inch main. When someone wanted to have connect, we would have to go back out with our crews and install that line. It would be roughly $500. And then the 2-inch main. I've looked at what the cost of equipment. I'm proposing that the city install those mains, recoup the costs through an assessment process. The cost would, I'll get to the cost in a minute, but it would be $600 per household. So the total cost of the installation and connection would be $7,260 as an estimate right now. The mound system, if you called a septic tank company today, is going to run you somewhere around $5,000 to $8,000. A conventional drain field is still probably in the $3,000 to $4,000 range. I don't see how we could ever get that low, but we are comparable when you look at the alternative for the older homes and the mound systems that might be required. Impact fees are then $2,290 for a total cost of $9,550. I know there's discussions on impact fees, but let's wait till later as we discuss this further. Construction necessary to install this. Let me see if I can get. You look at the purple lines. The purple lines are the lines within the city of Vero Beach. We would have to go in a directional drill. We don't want to tear up anybody's streets, driveways, anything. So this would be all done by boring underneath the ground, least amount of impact. In the areas where you see purple would be city of Vero Beach city limits. The other areas are other areas of our service territory. And the only thing we're talking about today is Vero Beach, since we don't have any enforcement action on the other areas. All we can talk about at my level is Vero Beach. If the other areas wanted to participate, we'd be glad to do those areas also. However, that would be an action of their council members or county commissioners. There's roughly 93,000 feet of line that would have to be installed in Vero Beach. The other areas are 90,000 in Indian River County and about 13,000 in the town of Indian River Shores. For city of Vero Beach, for us to install lines, it would take about 2 years. We'd have to purchase equipment of about $160,000. We'd have to purchase pipe of about $175,000, valves and other fittings at $250,000, sod, concrete, etc. of about $100,000. And then if we use our own labor, we would have to recoup those labor costs since we can't have our ratepayers paying for our labor. So that would be $200,000. So it's roughly $885,000 divided by the $1,484 comes out to be about $600 a lot. Impact on the residents in front of their home would be about 1 to 2 weeks. I think we can skip that one. You didn't.
One of the questions that I have, is it possible to have this presentation up on our city's website with the hyperlinks active?
Yeah, and what I can do is I can do it again and let the videos play so that you get the full effect.
Yeah.
I know you didn't want to sit here and go through 15 minutes. And there's actually another video of the boring and showing how it would work,
Yeah,
and it's very
I would
informative.
Like to be able to click through and review the videos and
Right.
and it's I think this is a really interesting concept, and it's as you.
And there's
It's shown,
hurdles.
It's pretty affordable.
It's
relatively.
affordable, but there's hurdles. You're going to have, and just like Mr. Mucher said to me, he says, I have 2 septic tanks. Well, he's going to look at it as you don't necessarily have to double the cost if he has 2 septic tanks, because he may be able to install just 1 septic tank with some lines leading into it. So there's a lot of variables in it that have to be discussed as we move forward.
Mm-hmm.
It is affordable. It's a very low upfront availability cost. If you're looking at $600 to a resident over 20-year financing, that's $30 a year. That gives you the ability to get off your septic tank when it does fail or you need a repair permit. Council would have to take action and change some requirements to have it to where if it is available, they have to connect. We'd have to look at working with the state to allow to have the backup for the drain fields. But it's affordable. I've been trying to figure out a solution for 25 years, and this is the first time I've been able to figure something out this cheap. So,
well, I find it very interesting, and it is something that we do need to address. What I'd like to recommend, you've given us a lot of information.
Mm-hmm.
Give us an opportunity to digest this. Put the links up so we can, at our leisure, watch the videos over the next month, and then maybe we can.
Actually, to all the utility commission members, we can send you the links of all the hyperlinks to it. The reason I had it here where we clicked to them was so it would come up on here and it wouldn't be real small print, and we could expand.
Yeah, and that was very useful.
But we can send you all of those with the titles of each one of them, so you can pull each one up and look at it.
Okay, but if we could, I don't know if it's be possible to put this presentation up on the website with active hyperlinks.
I will talk with.
See if we can do that, because that would be that's some good information, and it so I don't know if anybody has any.
I just have one quick question and then maybe comment. Rob, you recently had the presentation with, it's Nick Thomas, right? In his community, Seminole Shores. Refresh my memory what those residents were told the cost would be.
They were probably in the neighborhood of $15,000 to $18,000 by the time they all got done, because not only did you have the cost for the and here's the problem: the availability cost up there was $12,000 to $15,000. Then you had on-site costs of around $3,000. So in this situation,
does that include the impact fee? That number, the 15 to 18, or would that be
15 to 18? I think included the impact fee.
Okay, all right.
I've seen it as high as 20. They were actually a cheap solution because there was a lift station there. If you would have factored in the lift station costs, you would have added another $2,000 or $3,000 to those costs. So.
Rob, I got a quick question. When we say the step equipment, just to understand this, so it'd be including going into an existing septic tank, modifying that, adding that equipment, doing the piping and all of that?
Right.
And then if somebody wanted to get rid of their existing drain field, there'd be a whole different system, but that would be an additional cost to that.
The difference in cost between getting rid of the drain field and the situation you have, what we showed there was if you wanted to, and this will fall into some situations where people may want to make a decision. If they have a septic tank that's broken, it's leaking into the ground, and they have to replace it, then you could go with the second alternative: replace the drain, replace the septic tank, put the pump in it. Then, if you had a generator on your house, or you didn't have to go with the drain field. You necessarily didn't have to. Then you still get rid of your drain field and you have a brand new tank. You're probably looking at about $750 to $1,000 more by the time you bought. You get credit for the pump station, but then you had to buy the septic tank. So it's a little bit more, but not a drastic amount.
Robin, in your service area, are you saying that the city's total liability is estimated to be $885,000?
Upfront costs to get the mains installed, yes. That covers that $600. We would recoup that $600. That's what covers that $600. Yes.
And from that point forward, obviously, you just have routine maintenance or replacement or somewhere down the road.
You're looking at. I talked with a company that has 4,000 of them in Tennessee, and they say, you're going to start off once a year going in until you know the system a little bit better, and people get educated on them, and then they're only visiting them about once every 2 years. Once the people understand them, and once the utilities get a better feel for them, then they say their maintenance really falls back to about once every 2 years. So I put it in as once every year as my cost.
And in the service area, if this were to be done, does it resolve, assuming that the citizens ultimately agree in terms of their own property, that would resolve the problem in 100% of those areas that are contributing to the power problem?
Yes. So if you took that number, roughly double it, that's what the cost would be to go outside the city limits and serve those other areas.
Those are our service areas?
It's our service territory, but it's outside our city limits.
Okay.
So in the case of the members right here on the board, you have Chuck, you have you, Scott, and Toby that are city residents, that this is going to impact city residents. It's not going to impact people outside it, because we don't have the authority to go in there and mandate things outside our city limits. This is going to require the city to look at it and say, we for once and for all, we want to get off a septic tank, so therefore we're going to go move forward with a system like this and require connection in the future.
Or require a countywide cooperative effort.
Well, the county could go in and say, in the areas that the city of Vero Beach is serving, we agree also, and go ahead and provide it in those areas. But if you're going to go countywide, I'm not doing it.
No, you're not. But we have a countywide. The lagoon affects the whole county.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah. So no, this is. I appreciate that. I understand that. Okay. Well,
I got one more quick question. 2-inch line, so that'd be a trencher?
Actually, we would look at buying a directional drill machine, just drill in every 300 feet, come up and make a connection.
But I mean, the main would be a trencher.
Polyline.
Okay.
Seamless. No, welded connections, therefore no leaks.
Okay.
What are we going to do with this information, Mr. Chairman?
We're going to think about it for the next month, and we'll discuss it again next month, see if we want to come up with a recommendation to City Council.
Okay, well, I'd like to applaud Rob. I think the health of the Indian River Lagoon is probably the most important issue that faces the county as a whole, and there's been a lot of pushback on the septic tank issue, and this could be a real opening in getting that resolved. So good work, Rob.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay. There being...
And I'd like to thank Sharon for helping me put the whole thing
Yes, Sharon,
and
thank you. No other business on our agenda today. I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Adjourn. Thank you very much.